South Park Butters does have a superpower. I realized this today after watching an episode from season 16. Butters and Kenny take a trip to Hawaii, and while shooting golf balls towards a cruise ship, he manages to hit the ball with such strength that he not only reaches the ship, it goes through the glass of the ship, through the lens of a pair of binoculars, and into the eye of the captain. He unleashes such chaos with that golf ball that the cruise breaks in half and sinks. I just ruled it out as South Park's usual shenanigans until the Hawaiian locals tried the same and didn't even reach the boats of the Coast Guard. Then I remembered that episode where Stan tries to recruit him into his dance crew. He reveals that he was a pro tap dancer, but in one competition a shoe flew off his feet and caused a huge accident. Then it happened again. Then when Cartman hands him a gun in the episode of the Indiana Jones raping hardly a more chaotic setting than this one, he manages to fuck up more the situation by only managing to shoot people in the dick. It's simple enough. Maybe it's been posted before, but I realized that Butters does have superpowers. The thing is that he doesn't control them at all. It has nothing to do with the superpowers of Professor Chaos. Although it does relate with Chaos, he appears to have the ability to beat all odds in order to reap chaos in huge loves, like a shoe hitting a scoreboard and killing a bunch of people, or a golf ball managing to cause a cruise sinking. The only time that he seems to control it, it's with the golf ball, but I would guess that it has to do with the fact that he was going through a mood swing. He shifted from his amiable and kind persona to a way more aggressive, assertive, and extremist one. While in the tap accident was well an accident, and during the shootings he was being pressured by Cartman. That's it. I'm sure there must be more examples of Butters unintentionally escalating other situations, but these were the ones who came to mind. Jimmy Neutron got his intelligence from his father. The show always tried to make it seem like he got his intelligence from his mother, which is fair, considering she is pretty smart. In the episode See Jimmy Run, she scientifically pointed out a flaw in Jimmy's shoebot. She's also a mechanic. The show also portrays the father as unintelligent. The official description even states it's clear that Jimmy didn't inherit his genius from his dad, Hugh. So with all of this evidence favoring the mother, what is making me question Jimmy's genius inheritance? Well, first, the mother might be smart, but not a genius like Jimmy. There are a lot of instances where she's as clueless as her husband. Secondly, and more importantly, there is only one other person in the Neutron family that is as smart, if not smarter than Jimmy. Baby Eddie. He is the family's only other genius. And he's from the father's side of the family. Club is a twisted version of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I was watching Ferris Bueller's Day Off last night on Netflix, and the theory that Ferris is a creation of Cameron Fair kept circling around my head, and I began to realize just how many similarities the theory had to the story of Fight Club. It's entirely possible that Cameron Fair grew up to become Edward Norton's character in Fight Club. Jack and Tyler Durden is basically a more aggressive and hypersexualized Ferris Bueller, which makes sense, as Tyler Durden was created by an adult mind, as opposed to a teenage mind of Cameron. Both films use narration throughout. Both films are escapist fantasies, and both films have a character eventually standing up, an authority figure, kinda. Sorta. I admit the theory falls down when it comes to Marla Singer, as she supposedly represents either the narrator's mother, the female part of the narrator's brain, or the narrator's repressed homosexual side. And I don't think Sloane Peterson is any of those things in Cameron Fair's mind. I think Sloane is simply Cameron's dream girl. But perhaps Jeannie Bueller is the female part of Cameron's brain, or perhaps even his repressed homosexual side. I admit I haven't got much evidence to back it up. I just thought I'd throw out there and see what people think. I mean, there is admittedly a much simpler explanation, which is Fight Club was directly or indirectly influenced by Ferris Bueller's Day Off. From Beauty and the Beast wasn't really as bad as we thought. Since Disney's Beauty and the Beast came out, a lot of people, including filmmakers, has been debating whether Gaston is an actual villain or not. Is he a bad guy? Maybe. Can we really call him a villain? I don't think so. First of all, I would like to compare him with other villains from Disney World. He didn't kill his own brother and blamed it to his nephew. He didn't kidnap a girl to use her magical hair. He didn't manipulate a girl only to rule a kingdom. He didn't turn kids into donkeys and sold them. He didn't commit genocide. The point is, Gaston isn't made just to be a villain. In fact, his whole character was first made before they decide he's the villain. Belle's end was supposed to be, and his existence isn't focusing on being evil. He was just a human with his flaws. Now let's talk a little about Gaston himself, and his social life, and his personality in general. Gaston is the hero of the town, admired by everyone, and his best friend is a dwarf. Even for someone who people call arrogant, I think that says something else. He's humble, yes, he beats the crap out of him, but in Disney World it's more goofing around. He even does it to his other friends. Just a note for those who says he beats Lefau for being a dwarf and only on his friends. His close friends notice how he never beats up anyone in the bar, except them who would say he thrown the chess table at that guy. But in fact the guy was cheating in the game. Gaston went easy on him, because, if it was the Old West, he would be dead. He's even polite with strangers in the village. In the opening number he says, "Excuse me and please let me through," instead of shoving people off his way, because he's a strong, handsome, huge, beloved guy now. A lot of people are saying the village likes Gaston only for being handsome and strong, but is it really just that? First, France at that time had a problem with wild animals such as bears, and we can see a bear's head in Gaston's wall. He protects the village. Also, the village is poor. As Bill stated, Gaston also feeds his village. He's not only hunting for himself, that's for sure. And in the full version of the song he was called that hero next door, and I'm pretty sure he's not a hero for being handsome or hunting for sport. He did more than that, and when the villagers believe they're in danger, they count on Gaston to protect them. Not Because he's beautiful, the guy has proven himself to the village in countless of his heroic stories before the events of the movie. Notice how Gaston is a serving member for his community, something Disney villains aren't so good at. Now I would like to point out the similarities in Gaston and the Beast. The Beast had those gentle objects in the castle telling him to be a better person every day for 10 years, and that really didn't work with him. Hell, he almost killed Belle because she entered that room. Really, if she didn't dodge that hit she would have been dead. Only because he's quick-tempered. The Beast had all the chances to become a better person and he barely changed. Gaston, on the other hand, was surrounded by jerks, yes. Jerks. After Belle rejects him and publicly humiliated him, he goes to his tavern yelling how no one says no to him and all, but whatever, it's pretty clear for him that he can't get all he wants, and that's life. He have to get used to this change. Animated Jafar was the good guy. In Aladdin, Jafar was the good guy. The city of Agrabah was ruled by an uncaring monarch. The sultan, who played with toys, clearly ate too much, and lived in an extravagant palace. Meanwhile, his people were starving and lived in severe poverty, barely surviving as bandits, brothels, and beggars populated the streets. And the sultan's naive, silver-spoon daughter thought she understood the people's lives after spending, like 2 hours outside. So, as the Grand Vizier, that's like a Prime Minister, Jafar got fed up and did the only thing he could to save his people: orchestrate a coup d'etat to seize power from the ineffective sultan. Sadly, his plans were foiled by the selfish Aladdin. Aladdin was a self-admitted thief and conman who stole from poor people. He only cared about himself. He got 3 wishes and used them to become a fake prince in order to hit on the only rich girl in town, save his life from a jam he got himself into, and then freed the genie, probably in the hopes of having an all-powerful ally. What did he do for his people? Nothing. Jafar did everything he could to save Agrabah, but in the end, Aladdin prevailed, moved into the palace with the princess, and the sultan continued ignoring his starving populace. The entire animated movie we saw was told by the genie to paint Aladdin and himself in the best and most sympathetic light. Revisionist history at its best. Jafar was the good guy. SpongeBob SquarePants and Chalk Zone are connected. You guys remember the show Chalk Zone, the fun adventures of Rudy Tabooti with his real-world friend Penny and his hand-drawn Snap, as they go through adventures through the Chalk Zone? But wait, how did the Chalk Zone get created? Well, what if I told you that SpongeBob's home is linked to the Chalk Zone? In the episode Frank and Doodle, SpongeBob and Patrick discover a pencil that fell down from the surface from a human artist at sea. It is no ordinary pencil. Whatever artwork or shape they make using it comes to life, and the eraser can permanently destroy it. However, an artwork created by SpongeBob named Doodle Bob creates havoc inside SpongeBob's house. They eventually stopped Doodle Bob from moving by pressing him against a hardcover exercise book, which the page was then pinned on the wall. Doodle Bob then returns in the episode Doodle Dimension. In this episode, SpongeBob and Patrick become trapped in an alternate dimension, where anything they draw comes to life, and bring back Doodle Bob, who threatens them both. The Doodle Dimension matches the same description as the Chalk Zone, wherein the drawing come to life. So here's the theory: the Doodle Dimension and the Chalk Zone are same place, and here's how. The magic chalk and the magic pencil have the same magic properties, and in the doodle dimension you can any item into a writing utensil, like Spongebob turn his shoe into a pencil, and when Spongebob gave Doodle Sandy the show pencil, she created a portal to their world. But what if this portal wasn't just a portal to Spongebob's world, but to Rudy's world too? Then when the kids from Rudy's world get sucked into the doodle dimension, they bring their chalk as well. The kids start drawing with chalk, and the chalk starts absorbing the magic from magic pencil. Doodle gets interested in the chalk uses, and chalk becomes the new way of world building, and it replaces pencils, and the inhabitants of the doodle dimension and the human kids build make the doodle dimension more colorful, get taught how to speak English by the kids, and then they become friendly to people from both worlds for constructing their colorful home. Then the people of the doodle dimension rename the world a chalk zone, and they create locations around the zone such as Candy Cane Forest, Mumbo Jumbo Jungle, a named Paintbrush Like Forest, the Happiness French Fry Falls, Just Desert, London Town, Small Town. But then some reckless kids enter the chalk zone and start creating dangerous creations, and none of these creations kills Doodle Bob and Doodle Friends, so as a result, Cyclops banished the kids from the chalk zone and kept all the magic chalk in the mines. TLDR, doodle dimension and chalk zone are the same place. Chalk zone was creations from the chalk absorbing the magic pencil, and kids who was in the zone killed Doodle Bob and Cyclops banished and kept all the magic chalk in the mines. So basically I'm saying Spongebob and Chalk Zone take place in the same multiverse, and if this is true, we could Spongebob meet Rudy and they both the magic pencil and magic chalk for any situation. What do you think of this theory? Would you like a Spongebob and Chalk Zone crossover? Let me know in the comments below. Ninjago and Avatar are set in the same universe. Now, I know that I sound crazy, but I think this might be true, even if not explicitly canon. My theory / headcanon is that Ninjago is set in a very different place, likely halfway across the globe from where Avatar takes place. Something like that. Culture over there evolved into what our world is like today, which is why Ninjago City looks much like any modern capital you might find in our world. They don't call bending, as those in Avatar do, and instead, they refer to one with elemental control as the master of said element. There can be only one master for each element at a time. A new form of bending has been discovered there, known to the people of Ninjago as Spinjitzu. Spinjitzu is a form of bending that grants the user the ability to create a miniature tornado of their mastered element around themselves, while also allowing them to travel at faster speeds than they naturally would. Here's what I think every character falls under: Kai fire bending, Cole earth bending, Jay lightning bending, Zane ice bending, Lloyd energy bending, Nile water bending, Senseiwoo energy bending. However, in the far-off land of Ninjago, only few people can become benders, which is why Senseiwoo has taught nearly every bender in Ninjago. Benders in Ninjago can also reach a form similar to the Avatar form that they call the full potential form. Let's not forget what led me to this theory. Two of the characters in Avatar are named Woo. Here's my grand theory connecting the two shows. Madame Woo is the mother of Senseiwoo. Let me explain the theory I wrote. Madame Woo fell in love with a strange man in her prime. The man was surprisingly an outcast among people of the Earth Kingdom, as he talked of a new form of bending he claimed he created. Their relationship lasted long, and they eventually married and had 3 children. The man always talked of leaving the Earth Kingdom and traveling to a far-off nation, but Madame Wu never wanted to leave her home. One day, the man mysteriously left the kingdom and took 2 of the 3 children with him. Madame Wu was heartbroken, but stood strong. She eventually raised the 3rd child to be the current king of the Earth Kingdom. However, that man she married was none other than Nolan Garmadon, the first master of Spinjitzu and the founder of Ninjago. He created the golden weapons to shape the land to his will. He raised those 2 boys to become 2 of the strongest warriors in the world. He named the eldest after the woman he loved, Wu, who would become the mentor to the masters of Spinjitzu. He named the younger Montgomery, who would later become known as Lord Garmadon in due time. With this, it's likely Ninjago takes place many years after Avatar, seeing as Madame Wu isn't dead or 100 years old by the time we meet her. Please remember this is just a theory and I'm more than likely to be entirely incorrect. I grew up with Ninjago, although I reject any of the new seasons. I've only recently been introduced to Avatar and don't know that much about it yet. SquarePants Spongebob will eventually kill Mr. Krabs. Here's another theory for you about Spongebob SquarePants. Spongebob is eventually going to murder Mr. Krabs. We all know that Spongebob is essentially a slave to Mr. Krabs. But in some episodes, we see him rebel against him, like when Spongebob yelled at Mr. Krabs in the episode about Mr. Krabs' attempted date with Mrs. Puff. Or when Spongebob shouted at Mr. Krabs about wanting to go to bed in the episode about the board game and buried treasure. Or when Spongebob refused to beat up his best friend despite it being a command from Mr. Krabs in the episode about the fry cook games. And each time Spongebob does this he is slowly and in small amounts breaking his ties with Mr. Krabs. So, once Spongebob is fully liberated from the control of Mr. Krabs, he will murder him as possibly an act of revenge. Thank you for reading. Morty, why the devil couldn't get a read on Rick. Hey there. Small theory here. In the Summer and Devil episode, the devil gets a read on everyone who enters his store and offers them a specific item to fit their needs. When Rick came in, the devil needed wonders, like when Rick said that he's a man of science, making the devil offer him the microscope. I think this is because the devil actually couldn't read as Rick because he was from another timeline. A few episodes before this, he and Morty switched timelines because of the Cronenberg incident. Godparents, fairies, or demons, or something similar. I am still not sure on this one, but well. Here goes. My idea is that fairies are demons who try and bring kids to sin and commit bad acts. Here's the proof. As Timmy grew older, his dad recorded everything that he did every day, and put it all on tape so they could watch it later. When he turned 8, Timmy's parents told a lie that made Timmy get stuck with the evil babysitter Vicky. Timmy also met Vicky's sister Tootie around this time, and she took an immediate liking to him. One day, after being tormented by Vicky, he threw his lucky magic 9 ball at the wall in frustration, and Cosmo and Wanda emerged when the toy broke. The 2 fairies became Timmy's fairy godparents, watching over him and granting wishes to make him less miserable. This was revealed in the movie Abracatastrophe. So Timmy gains his fairies by throwing a magic 8 ball at the wall. Very strange. The magic 8 ball is a form of fortune telling, right? Which is a sin according to the Bible. Fortune-telling divination is closely related to magic, which is commonly used to summon demons. So what if Timmy throwing the magic 8-ball at the wall summoned demons? It's not impossible. Another couple things are that these wishes get Timmy whatever he wants, which commonly leads to greed, pride and slothfulness, and that the godparents have no objection to Timmy's wishes. It is perfectly possible that the godparents are demons sent by Satan to trick kids into sinning and committing bad acts. Mr. Masaji, the player character, is Johnny Bravo. This theory is pretty simple. The player character in Mr. Masaji is Johnny Bravo. Evidence: 1. The character is named Johnny. 2. His silhouette is incredibly buff. 3. One of his phone profile options is "There's a handsome man in my phone." Oh wait, it's only me. 4. And most importantly, his potential dates are a werewolf, a ghost, an alien, a cow, etc. This fits right into Johnny Bravo's previous exploits of trying to hit on werewolves, antelope, gods, and various other creatures. Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, 1971. The children wrapped up their stories in ways inspired by classical Greek elements. I know it sounds like a stretch, but hear me out. I hope this hasn't been touched upon already. Earth Augustus Gloop. You might think this one would be watered due to the river, but it's commented that the river looks muddy, ergo earthen. Consider that Augustus is transferred to the fudge room, fudge being brown and therefore, in my opinion, indicative of the element earth. Water. Violet Beauregard. This one is a little more obvious. Violet chews some prototype gum that fills her up with liquid and turns her blue, representing water. Fire. Veruca Salt. Pretty hard to miss. She was a redhead with a fiery, caustic temper who, possibly, fell into a furnace. All signs point to fire. Air. Mike Tavi, who vanished into thin air and was transferred over airways to appear on television. I think it's safe to say this one pertains to air. THER. Charlie Bucket, the element above all the others. This is briefly alluded to when Charlie and Grandpa Joe steal fizzy lifting drinks, perhaps as an additional allusion to Deadless. At the end of the film, Charlie, Wonka, and Grandpa Joe board the Wonkavator, rising above all like either species was enslaved by Metromans. Okay, let's put some facts here. During the intro we see both planets. They both were on the same solar system and both were of the same size. Therefore the abilities of Metroman were the product of his genes, not his ambient like Superman. This is reinforced by the fact that Megamind was able to give those abilities to someone else through a sample of Metroman's genes. So his whole species had those abilities even in his local solar system. Even from the beginning of his journey, Megamind's ship seemed to be of lesser quality compared to Metroman's ship. It flew better, it was more comfortable, and it had more accommodations, and both were quite similar. However, Megamind showed he was a genius. Since he was a baby after all, he even remembered the events of stuff that happened 8 days after he was born. So we can assume that just like Metroman, his superintelligence is a common trait for his whole race. So, if they all were so intelligent, why was his ship so badly constructed, and why was Metroman's much better? Simple. Metroman's species used his superior physical powers to enslave Megamind's species. They were the ones who built a spaceship for Metroman's parents. Megamind's parents probably knew their planet was going to be destroyed, so they decided to build their own ship. However, they didn't have the resources to build a good one because of their situation as an oppressed race, so they did the best they could with the materials at hand. He loves Raymond. Deborah is the real villain and the show ended because of her. I know she's treated unfairly by Marie, but my theory is about Ray and Deb. She constantly bullies Ray, calls him names, calls him an idiot for everything, hits him. Doesn't seem to really care for Ray. Sends him out alone when she hears a noise downstairs while she stays in bed. Doesn't even flinch when he says he almost got killed at work. Only seems to care for him in the very final episode. Blames Ray for everything going wrong in the house. Constantly berates him for not helping out at home, even though he is working for the family. Immediately goes to blame him when one of the twins fails school by saying he should have read to him. Doesn't take any responsibility herself for the kid failing. Yes, I agree Ray should be more responsible, but it doesn't look like she does her part in taking care of the house based on what Marie says about the state of the house frequently. Is not a very pleasant person to be around, or not as nice as she thinks she is, based on how she does at her new job. Doesn't win school election, of course blames Ray again. Now, why I think they ended the show. Every time Deb mistreats Ray, the audience cheers. Ray Romano, creator of the show, wanted a comedy about a dysfunctional family where the wife is the villain. But, as the show went on, people supported Deb more. It was like no one got the joke. So maybe he got sick of it and ended up finishing the show, even though it was very successful. Dragon secretly a princess? She has lipstick, eyelashes, and just gives off the vibe she was once a princess. She could have been sent away into the tower, as Princess Fiona is, and was waiting for her true love to save her and become the princess she is meant to be. She could have a curse that left her being transformed into a dragon, and she believes that Donkey is her savior. She may have the love towards Donkey straight away, because he speaks like a human, so it may have confused her into thinking Donkey was once also a prince and that he is the one there. To save her, they kiss. She stays a dragon like Princess Fiona stays an ogre. A pup named Scooby-Doo. Daphne's father has mob connections. In the series, Daphne's father is shown to be extremely wealthy. However, how he made the wealth isn't clear. In one episode, her father is shown to own a video arcade. This could easily be a front for something else. It is likely that he is either a mob boss or was in some way involved in money laundering or some other illegal activity. If this is true, then it could mean that Jenkins, their butler, could be more than just their butler. We've seen the good future of Samurai Jack. Time Squad is a cartoon show from the early 2000s about the adventures of a police unit who are sent back from the year 3000 to correct historical mistakes. One key member of the team is Otto, a 21st century kid. In one episode, Otto gets lost and Time Squad try out several other children, most prominently Dexter of Dexter's Laboratory fame. This establishes Time Squad as part of the Dexter Powerpuff Girls shared universe. This has interesting implications for Samurai Jack, a show also set in this continuity. Jack is sent forward to roughly the same time frame as Time Squad. Yet the world in Time Squad is very different in Time Squad. Clearly Time Squad is the good future Samurai Jack caused by defeating Aku in the past. He Simpson's Frank Grimes wouldn't have suffered a mental breakdown if Homer had told him that Grandpa Simpson had helped him buy his house, what Grimes considers a mansion. Abraham Simpson sold his home and helped his son buy his own home. He got dumped in a retirement home, and if you look at the conflicting maps for the Simpsons' house, you'll see they might have enough room for him to stay with them. I mean, does the baby need her own room and a separate nursery? But that's a debate for another time. This is about Grimmy and his envy of Homer that leads him to commit suicide by copper wires. Frank Grimes directly enumerated his grievances against Homer, even though Homer has annoyed Frank as a terrible co-worker. His living situation can't be a purposeful insult against Frank. Homer only bugs Frank at work. Everyone has that. Frank is an underachieving turd, which can be frustrating, sure, but that's not Homer's fault either. Homer, despite all his faults, is not to blame for not telling Frank that he got a leg up from his father helping him buy his home, therefore saving Homer and Marge lots of money over the years to give them that middle-class life of stealing Flanders stuff. It was a lump sum injection at the perfect time, as Homer and Marge made a family that gave Homer his status. Without Grandpa Simpson selling his own house, Homer would be in a worse situation, one that doesn't bug Frank as much. How much worse Homer's situation would be can be mixed with how his alcoholism went. Homer keeps it down, his family can still be middle class. He turns into Barney, then no, he'll probably be lower class, and Marge still has abetted her sisters for her kids. The Simpsons are always worried about money at their kitchen table. This helps keep them relatable to everyone, but their lifestyle throughout the series doesn't seem to support that, Homer especially being the weak link there. This incongruity drives Frank Grimes mad, and to his shocking death. But if Homer told Frank that one trick that helped him up immensely, I think it would have let Frank Grimes contextualize Homer's life more easily, and he would have kept his sanity. Simpsons, why is it that a man whose shirt says genius at work spends all day watching a children's cartoon show? He was set up by Frank Grimes in order to make him look like an idiot. The theory goes that Frank Grimes somehow tricked him into believing that Itchy and Scratchy wasn't a cartoon for children, just like how he tricked Homer into believing the contest he entered to redesign the nuclear power plant wasn't for kids as well. The main link is that, when Homer was working on his model power plant he had been in the basement, he had a sign on his door that said "Genius at Work." And that both episodes Homer's Enemy and the Itchy and Scratchy and Poochy show aired during Season 8, with Homer's Enemy being episode 23 and the Itchy and Scratchy and Poochy show being episode 17. If one considers the timeline, then that would mean Frank Grimes would still be at college during the time of the Itchy and Scratchy and Poochy show, which is precisely where the nerd who had the Genius at Work shirt lived. Furthermore, when Homer went to college he got his degree in nuclear physics while living in the same room as those nerds. It only makes sense that when old Grimmy went to college to get the same degree it'd be in the same room as those three nerds as well. He only didn't run into Homer back then, because Frank Grimes was still recovering from that tragic silo explosion. So we've established a timeline, but not a motive. Maybe Grimmy was being graded on a curve, so he convinced his dorm mates to watch the adult programming that is itchy and scratchy, so Frank Grimes could get ahead and graduate. Aladdin the Kingdom was in trouble after the first movie ended. The guy who had been the brains behind the operation of the kingdom, Jafar, was gone. The Sultan is portrayed as somewhat bumbling, and a pushover. The new heir to the throne was an urchin with no experience in politics or leadership. His only reason to be interested in the job was because the princess was a hottie. The only reason he got the job is because he had a magical genie on his side. But that genie is also leaving town. As the movie ends, there's gonna be some awkward conversations in the near future when Jasmine and Sultan realize that Aladdin can't read or write. Jumanji was created by an enslaved African person to curse the children of their white slave owner. Evidence the game has African origins. The word Jumanji is Zulu word meaning many effects. In the first movie at least, it features African bats, elephants, lions, zebras and other animals that would normally be associated with Africa. It also had a quicksand effect which can also be found in parts of Africa. In Welcome to the Jungle, where the players went into the game itself, the townsfolk seem to speak Arabic or have North African influences. People who speak Zulu can also be the same people who practice voodoo, a traditional African religion often associated with magic and sorcery. Even though the game has African origins, it's written in English, as if the creator of the game had people who speak English in mind. In the first Jumanji movie, Alan finds the Jumanji game right after he allows the African-American factory worker to take the blame and later gets fired for something Alan did. Game usually seems to be calling people who descended from white slave owners. In the first movie, it was originally buried by two white boys who played the game, and they called Alan, a white boy from a very wealthy family. In Welcome to the Jungle, even though Fridge finds the game, Spencer is the one who the game seems to be calling to or made the main character. Also, African Americans can still be descended from white slave owners. Spencer is also the one who has the most difficulty letting go of the game, as if the game has a particular seductive quality to him. Specifically, in conclusion, I propose that Jumanji was created by an enslaved person to mess with the kids of their white slave owner, and it continues to call to those descendants long after chattel slavery was outlawed in the United States. Jumanji seems to be influenced by various African areas and cultures. The word itself is Zulu. The cities in the game look Arabic like parts of North Africa. There are deserts which are reminiscent of the Sahara Desert. It also features monsoons and rainforests which aren't found in North Africa. I think it would make sense for African slaves to have various influences from different parts of Africa, because slaves were taken from all around Africa and ended up interchanging cultures and ideas to create a pan-African identity of sorts. In some cases it has been brought to my attention that, although Robin Williams said Jumanji is a Zulu word, it is not a Zulu word. It is possible that witchcraft was performed and cursed the game of Jumanji due to also, voodoo is not an African religion and it's not practiced by the people of Southern Africa who speak Zulu. The 1950 didn't have it so bad really. We're led to believe that Cinderella has a hard life at the start of the movie, forced by cruel stepmother and stepsisters to be a servant but treated like a slave. Presumably she gets up really early every day in order to serve her stepfamily. However, when she does get up, she is helped to get washed and dressed by mice and birds. She may sing them a nice tune, but that's probably it. They are her slaves. And on the basis that they themselves are wearing miniature clothes, these mice and birds must be forced to get up even earlier for no pay at best. Cinderella is middle class in a feudal system of servitude. Jumanji original movie and Welcome to the Jungle. Jumanji is an ancient trickster god and playing its game is a form of worship. I haven't seen Next Level, so I'm not sure if this applies to that movie. In both the original movie and Welcome to the Jungle, though, I've noticed some elements that seem to align with stories of worshipping and making pacts with ancient gods. The only way to finish the game and exit its spell is to complete a quest and call its name. In both movies, this is presented as the critical step and by implication the whole point of the exercise. The game wants its name to be called out by one who has proven himself worthy. The process of proving oneself worthy involves personal sacrifice, beyond simply following a set of instructions. In Alan's case, this was indirect in the form of losing his youth and his parents, while the second gang saw a more direct sacrifice, as Bethany willingly gave up one of her lives for Helicopter Guy. The game wants to be sacrificed to in some manner. Beyond this, the game appears to entice each player to willingly embark on a quest in its name, and offers boons of various sorts in return for gameplay worship. Alan Parrish repairs his relationship with his father and marries Sarah. Judy and Peter get their parents back. Helicopter Guy appears to have a good life, and the 2017 gang seem better off. Drawing on this and a bit of the mythology of American gods, my conjecture is that an ancient trickster god like Anansi has found a way to survive through worship into the present day by appearing as a game to unwitting players. Puff Girls is propaganda. Alright, so hear me out. I'm stoned as fool, but I had this thought: the Powerpuff Girls is Christian 50s lifestyle propaganda. The Powerpuff Girls are made from sugar, spice, and everything nice, and they were supposed to be perfect. They also represent three archetypes of good girls. Blossom is the leader, Bubbles is wholesome, and Buttercup is the tomboy but still good. I know weak so far, but look at the villains. Him clearly a transgender person and or homosexual of some sort. Not only is he their most powerful and cunning foe, whenever he is around the world looks like literal hell that is only matched by his devilish appearance. He definitely the sin of wrath, when you see his anger. Sedusa is a seemingly mild-mannered, submissive, docile woman. But underneath her pink dress perfect smile she is anything but docile. She is a bad bitch. She is a dom and she does not like back talk. She also represents the sin of lust. Macho Jojo is anti-evolution. He is an intelligent ape who everyone insists on calling a monkey. His entire character is science-based from his creation to his weapons. He also represents envy. Princess Morbux, she is not a good girl. She's mean and rude and just a royal bitch to everyone. She is the opposite of what the Powerpuff Girls should be. She represents greed. The Gangrene Gang are hoodlums and gangsters who look sickly, as if on drugs. Some of the episodes they run sound like drugs, mind-rattling juice. They are gluttony. Ace is the sweet-talking leader of the Gangrene Gang who talks people into bad things, and I think he is the perfect representation of vanity. The Round Earth Boys are just boys who like to cause trouble. They're the bad boys you don't want your kid dating. They represent pride, as they always underestimate the Powerpuff Girls as well as their own weaknesses. Not perfect, but it was fun to write LOL. Jumanji. In the original Jumanji with Robin Williams, the game is not allowed to actually kill anyone. It can scare people as much as it wants and even severely injure them, but not kill anyone. Despite all the chaos going on in the town, no one is shown to be killed, put in a situation that would kill them if screen, and no deaths are ever mentioned. Over 80 cases of giant mosquito bites are mentioned, but no one dies from it. The poisonous barb that Judy is shot with is never mentioned to be lethal. Alan Parrish should not have survived 26 years in the jungle. Jumanji is a dangerous place filled with almost supernatural horrors. There is no way a boy could survive for as long as he did under normal circumstances. 3. Van Pelt and the game in general had many opportunities to kill one or all of the players on multiple occasions, but choose not to. Instead, it tries to take the game board away from them or otherwise prevent them from progressing towards the end. Van Pelt is a seasoned hunter who has spent years hunting one normal human. There is also a part where he sneaks up on the others and instead of shooting them, he steals the game from them. In the last moments of the game, he has Alan cornered and could have taken him out at any moment, yet he did not. He fires a bullet at the last moment, but it is sucked back into the game before anything else. This contributes to another minor theory that he is a real human with free will trapped in the game. He must follow the rules of the game, but unlike most other creatures and events, has a will separate from that of the game. This could all be because the movie is rated PG and a violent death would make the movie less family friendly. The plot would also stop if no one could take their turn and finish the game, and would be really dark if they were just stuck in there forever because a player died. However, this rule of no killing also applies to the sequels. No real person is ever killed, and the deaths are video game lives that do not result in permanent death. This is a fan theory without too much evidence to support it, but the evidence that is there does lead me to believe one thing: Sportacus is a Nazi. Now that the shock reveal is out of the way, let's talk evidence. 1. Sportacus lives in an airship. Now, admittedly, I'm not sure on the difference between airships, but we know that Germans used Zeppelins during the Nazi times, seen in the unfortunate Hindenburg disaster. Now, Sportacus himself obviously isn't German, but he does live on what I'm going to call, for the sake of the argument, a Zeppelin. 2. He forces the people of Lazy Town to succumb to his will. We're told Robbie Rotten is a bad guy for making people lazy, but the town is called Lazy Town. One would assume that in a town called Lazy Town, people would be lazy and not want to be sporty. Until Sportacus flies in with his Zeppelin encouraging people to be active. It's Lazy Town, not Sporty Town. Clearly, he is forcing them to be active when they would rather be lazy. 3. Robbie Rotten lives in an underground bunker. Sportacus flies in with his Zeppelin, forced lazy residents to be active, so Robbie is forced to flee underground until he can fight back against the tyrant that is Sportacus. That's why Robbie is so determined to make Lazy Town lazy again and get rid of Sportaflop. He is desperate for life to go back to normal, but Sportacus won't let them. 4. Sportacus's mustache. This is where the obvious parallel comes in, but he comes in with his Zeppelin, forces people to be active, forces Robbie to hide underground, and has a crazy mustache. Do I even need to explain how these fit together? Conclusion. My conclusion is that Sportacus is 100% a Nazi, as seen in the evidence presented to us. If there is any dispute, I would love to hear it, as discussions about dumb theories are always fun. Thank you for taking the time to read this. Dragons TV series. The Dungeon Master is a dragon. So this is for an old animated series, and it's applying some new Dungeons and Dragons stuff to a very old show that wasn't really well thought out. But as I watch this with a more modern understanding of the franchise, I can't help but think that the Dungeon Master is an ancient red dragon in the disguised form of a human. We later in the show meet Zandora, a similar entity to him. She refers to herself as the sorceress. In modern Dungeons and Dragons, people with draconic-fueled powers are sorcerers, so maybe it's just easier for her to disguise her draconic magic as sorcery, and she is also an ancient dragon, perhaps blue, considering her clothing in humanoid form. Ensure, who is the son of Dungeon Master, has draconic features, horns and wings. He is humanoid. So it's likely he is a draconic sorcerer, although typically the default flavor and or lore would put him as a half-dragon. The rules in D&D are a bit fast and loose with this stuff, plus it's Ice in the Forgotten Realms where that specific lore applies. Also, I haven't gotten to this episode yet, but I'm told the magic weapons the kids have derived their powers from a draconic graveyard. And it would make sense if gaining that power was important, because it was additional draconic power. Also, when Venger is teleported to the real world, he is still able to use his magic as that, because sorcerers derive their power from within rather than external forces. And maybe this whole thing explains the rivalry between Venger and Shyman. What better way for Venger to prove his draconic power than to usurp the Queen of Dragons? There is no real evidence for any of this. It doesn't fit modern Dungeons and Dragons perfectly, or even Dungeons and Dragons at the time like at all, but if I was making this game, this is what I would do. Edit, more details. Venger is able to transform into a largely draconic form. Venture also creates a demo dragon, which is a draconic creature. When Eric is made Dungeon Master, and he actually starts doing the job, well, a red dragon comes out of freaking nowhere and starts harassing the group, and his powers inexplicably stop working. Baby is a lot darker than anyone realizes. Okay, so I watched this film the other day and something didn't sit with me right throughout the movie. Tim and Boss Baby's arc is that they go from not liking each other to loving each other through running through the various hardships in the movie. Tim goes from hating the idea of having a baby brother to loving the fact and forming a brotherly bond with Boss Baby, realizing that they can actually get along. Tim has bonded with his brother. They love each other, as brothers do, and even when Boss Baby goes back to the baby realm, Tim writes to Boss Baby convincing him to come back to the human realm, to which he misses Tim too and agrees to go back. So he rides the weird baby conveyor into human world and become a real kid once again. However, this process wipes his memory, so essentially the new brother may as well be an entirely new kid. Boss Baby is super stoked riding down the baby chute, when in fact he is taking a one-way trip to his death. The new child who emerges to be with Tim is not the brother. Tim knows he's nothing but an imposter, a shell of who Boss Baby was before, but it's played off like a happy ending. This is an existential nightmare and is deeply unsettling to me. Whoever created Jumanji, the board game in the original movie, had no intention on killing any of its players. It only wanted to scare them and maybe rough them up a bit. I've been wondering what made the game for a while now and what its true goals were. It doesn't seem to be wanting to swallow people's souls or kill people, or else Alan would have died at age 12 in the jungle. After watching the movie over again, I noticed a few things that were interesting. First, it seems the game prevents outside interference in the game by causing chaos. Example: monkeys fucking with the cops, mosquitoes taking out the realtor, and the plant crushing the cop's car, preventing him from getting to the house in time to intervene. I also noticed that the game would mostly only terrify the players and not actually try to hurt them. Examples: the lion did not try to get out of bedroom, sort of just chilled for a while until game was done. The plants shooting arrows, while poisonous, may have not killed the girl, even if the game was far from over and the hunter seemed to always be just slightly off enough on his sim to not end Alan's life. Universal Monsters and Other Early Monsters, the Extended Shower Universe. My theory is that the Universal Monsters of the 30s, 40s and 50s are connected to the Shower timeline of kaiju films, and by a greater extent, other monsters from the 1930s through the 1970s. In Frankenstein vs. Berrigan, Frankenstein's heart is said to be eternal, a description shared only with a universal Frankenstein, as he was the only version of the character who kept coming back. And since Frankie is part of a completely different universe, the other monsters like the Wolfman, Dracula, the Gilman and more appeared in the Shower timeline. While Japan is a primary hotspot for kaiju, it isn't the only place where monsters attack. According to this theory, the exploits of King Kong, 1933, Gorgo, the Rhedosaurus, the Behemoth, the Ymir, and many more giant monsters happened in this universe. Here is my presented timeline for this new universe. Feudal times, the three treasures: unknown Pulgasari, unknown Daimogen, unknown return of Daimogen, unknown Daimogen strikes again, unknown 1930s through 1940s, Dracula 1931, Frankenstein 1931, The Mummy 1932, King Kong 1933, Son of Kong 1933, The Invisible Man 1933, The Bride of Frankenstein 1935, Werewolf of London 1935, The Invisible Woman 1940, The Mummy's Hand 1940, The Wolfman 1941, The Mummy's Tomb 1942, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman 1943, Son of Dracula 1943, The Mummy's Ghost 1944, 1950s, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms 1953, Creature from the Black Lagoon early 1954, The Mid 1954, Godzilla late 1954, Godzilla raids again early 1955, Revenge of the Creature mid 1955, I Came from Beneath the Sea mid 1955, Rotten 1956, The Beast from Hollow Mountain 1956, The Mysterians 1957, 20 Million Miles to Earth 1957, The Black Scorpion 1957, The Deadly Mantis 1957, Vera 1958, The Fly 1958, The Giant Gila Monster 1959, The Giant Behemoth 1959, 1960s, Frankenstein vs. Baragon 1960, Mothra 1961, Reptilicus 1961, Gorgo 1961, The Day of the Triffids 1962, King Kong vs. Godzilla 1962, Matango 1963, Atragon 1963, Mothra vs. Godzilla 1964, Dagora 1964, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster 1964, Battle in Outer Space 1965, Invasion of Astro Monster 1965, Alberat Horror of the Deep 1966, War of the Gargantuars 1966, Son of Godzilla 1967, King Kong Escapes 1967, Latitude Zero 1969, 1970s, Space Amoeba 1970. Godzilla vs. Ghidorah 1971, Godzilla vs. Gigan 1972, Godzilla vs. Megalon 1973, Zone Fighter 1973, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 1974, Terror of Mechagodzilla 1975, Gora 1979 through 1980. If you want to include it for completion you can, but it's too incompatible. War in Space 1988, 1999, Destroy All Monsters 1999. The Real Killer, A Nightmare on Elm Street. In the latter half of the film A Nightmare on Elm Street, the main protagonist Nancy participates in a sleep study after being terrorized by the nightmare monster Freddy in her dreams. In the sleep study scene, she apparently gets attacked by Freddy, but there is no footage shown. This is the first and only time in the film where an attack by Freddy is not shown through footage of a dream sequence. At first I thought the filmmakers just lost the footage, but then I started thinking, what if they didn't include footage here on purpose, in order to make us, as an audience, start to doubt Nancy's sanity and allude to the fact that Nancy is the real killer and Freddy is just a figment of her imagination that she created in order to reconcile with the fact that she's been murdering teenagers this whole time. Think about it. Nancy is the killer. She always has been. Later on in the story, she attacks Freddy when he goes after her mother. Nancy's father, the town sheriff, comes in and throws a blanket over the burning Freddy. Then they pull the blanket and see the skeleton of her mother get dragged down to hell through a portal created on the bed somehow. This could be seen as a strange allegory for parents who neglect their children going to hell, as Freddie takes Nancy's neglectful and alcoholic mother, but it still doesn't make any sense from a logical standpoint, unless you consider the fact that Nancy was the real killer this whole time and she staged that whole event with a bunch of practical effects to make someone her father, the sheriff, think that she was innocent, and it really was a magical demon killing everyone seems pretty suspicious, but maybe that's just me. I firmly believe Nancy is the real killer. And she's still out there. That's the real horror of this movie. TLDR, Nancy is the killer. She always has been. The 13th franchise, Jason Voorhees was the killer in every movie. Anyone who has seen Scream knows that it is one of horror's most poorly kept secrets that Mrs. Voorhees was the villain of the original Friday the 13th movie, avenging her son Jason, who later went on to become the star of the show. This was later followed by copycat killer Roy Burns in A New Beginning Part 5, but doesn't it seem strange that three spree serial killers all plagued the Crystal Lake region with the same motive and methodology? It would be like John Wayne Gacy and Dean Corll both moving into houses on Elm Street. I proposed that it was no coincidence at all. One pervasive question around the first Friday the 13th movie regards what Jason was doing for the 20 years after he drowned. If he loved his mother so much, why didn't he make himself known to her during one of her many Crystal Lake visits? Why didn't he kill anyone before seeing his mother die? We see Jason emerge from Crystal Lake at the end of Part 1 in child form, despite drowning 20 years prior. This is usually assumed to be either a dream or a psychic attack. And supernatural antics and psychic attacks are well established throughout the series, notably Parts 7 and 8. Another critical point is that the ethereal form of Jason is frequently portrayed as a child. Part 1, Part 8, and Freddy vs. Jason all make a point of this. Obviously, the representation is symbolic of his traumatic drowning, but it also reflects his severe developmental impediments going back to Mrs. Voorhees, who was compelled by a voice inside her head to kill them. Mommy, we are told she was driven mad after his death. But can we ignore Jason's notable absence, his psychic child avatar, and his later examples of parapsychological assault? That's right, I'm proposing that Mrs. Voorhees was not insane at all. She was a psychokinetic sock puppet for comatose Jason. The voices were real, and they were his. Then the traumatic decoupling that followed her death pulled him out from his slumber, and he continued where he left off until then. Perhaps he had been laying in undead torpor at the bottom of Crystal Lake, tubed up brain dead in a hospital bed somewhere, or lovingly tended to in a cabin by Elias or Crazy Ralph. Again, we have never been filled in on his whereabouts, so anything is possible. The strong genetic bond between Jason and his mother helps justify this connection, plus the persistence of the ki ma stamp even after her death. Jason Goes to Hell is a contentious part of the lore, but it supports both Jason's non-corporeal nature and the importance of Voorhees' blood. Moving on to Roy Burns, he was a paramedic in a caring profession, so his easy willingness to don the mass murderer hat is even more peculiar than Pamela's turn. Yes, his son had mental health issues, so we could infer Roy had problems too, but his son is portrayed as soft and harmless at this time. Jason is out of action much like the first movie. What better catalyst to to strike a new illegitimate undead psychic bond than the immeasurable trauma of Roy experiencing the death of his child, while under someone else's care, Jason's exact fate. Vital to note here is that Roy Burns doesn't go after the killer of his child or the custodians of the facility. He goes after local youth. Is it supposed to be a coincidence that this is Jason's exact MO? I put forward that Roy wasn't avenging his son. He was avenging Jason. For Jason certainly, Roy disguised himself as Jason, which is a weird flex, but that sits fine with me, since Mrs. Voorhees is shown to be evasive and in general control of her senses. Above all, none of Roy's motives or thought processes are ever explained in his own words. His entire plan was simply deduced by the authorities after his death. In conclusion, when his physical form lay dormant, Jason bluntly used the psychokinetic portion of his supernatural powers that he lacked the intellectual capacity to understand, to irresistibly compel Pamela and Roy to kill the guilty, much like he himself was irresistibly compelled to kill the ever contentious Jason Goes to Hell. Shows that Jason's essence is literally transferable, and an autopsy technician is hypnotically compelled to eat Jason's heart, leading to full possession. But even if we ignore this entry altogether, we can't ignore New Blood, Manhattan, or even Jason Lives. Jason's brushes with the psychic realm are unquestionably a part of the lore. Going a step further, you could even argue that comatose Jason compelled Tommy Jarvis to dig up his grave. There are just too many instances of people acting irrationally in the service of Jason every time he's out for the count. A Pixar theory. What if the Boo time travel theory is wrong? What if the main character in the Pixar cinematic universe is the character we have been with the longest, and each movie series is a phase of his life? Toy Story series toys, A Bug's Life, Bugs Finding Nemo and Finding Dory Beach, and or Travel Monsters Inc. overcoming fear of the dark, The Incredibles 2 overcoming his parents' divorce, Cars having to move Ratatouille the time he made his parents, while the environmental activist phase of the death of grandparents, Brave High School, Dungeons and Dragons Club, Monsters University, moving for school, Inside Out, figuring out the mind of a girl he likes, The Good Dinosaur, an archaeology class he took in college, Coco University level Spanish class, Onward, Dungeons and Dragons campaign in the college dorms, Soul, the result of the death of one of his middle school music teachers he loved and really inspired him to continue on in school. Man and the masters of the universe are the gods and demigods of an ancient culture. He-Man was one of the weirdest shows I ever watched as a kid. I owned the toys and watched the cartoon religiously, but there was always something that I just couldn't wrap my mind around when it came to the storyline. For example, if Castle Grayskull was so important, why didn't the good guys live there, or at least live nearby? Why were many of the heroes and villains also distorted? Some were half animal and others had machine parts. Also, why were there some machines like flying cars and yet they all seemed to live in a medieval wasteland? And finally, why was everyone so buff? Did they spend every off-camera second working out? Even King Randor was jacked. These questions have subtly bothered me for years, until a few months ago, when I was reading Neil Gaiman's Norse Gods and it finally hit me. He-Man isn't about some crazy futuristic / ancient battle between good and evil on Eternia. It's about a pantheon of bored immortals who have nothing to do but duke it out in their own twisted version of Valhalla or Olympus. Now, I know that there are lots of show and movie storylines that refute this theory, but if it were true, then all of the pieces would fit into place. Skeletor would be the god of the dead, and much like Hades, resented greatly. Evelyn would be goddess of evil magic, while the sorceress would be goddess of good magic. He-Man, of course, is already a very Thor-like thunder god, and his father is king of all the gods, though possibly a king in decline. Beast-Man, Merman, Stratus, Stinker and others are all animal demigods, while Triclops, Roboto, Fisto, and the other cyborgs represent the emerging technologies of their worshippers. Orko may even be a member of the race that worshipped these gods, and as a great wizard of his people was even able to live among them. Even Castle Grayskull makes sense, as many pagan pantheons have been built on the backs of the titans and giants who came before them. I love the extended images of the castle where you can see the ribcage and spine of this once powerful titan whose energy still emanates from his eternal bounds. While it may not be canon, this notion has greatly satisfied that gnawing dissatisfaction I have had with what the hell was going on in Eternia for all those years. The one great hook is that the masters of the universe don't seem to know that they are gods, which to me is the most godlike thing a god can do. So, much like their Norse cousins, these gods and demigods just live out their existences doing as they please and battling for supremacy in their eternal realm. Saved by the Bell. I theorize that Zatch, Screech, Lisa, and Belding died at the end of Season 1 in some shared mass casualty event like a bus crash or a school shooting. The first season takes place at Kennedy Junior High in Indianapolis and focuses mainly on the musings of the teacher Miss Bliss. She writes and speaks in bow about the kids every episode almost, as if in memoriam. Starting with Season 2, the show suddenly and abruptly moves to Bayside High School in LA with 3 of the same students, the same principal, and no Miss Bliss. Zatch is now the primary focus of the show, and he has gained the power to stop time and break the fourth wall. No in-show explanation is ever given. Why would 3 unrelated families and their principal move halfway across the country at the same time to the exact same school district? I posit they didn't. Inspired by the Grease theory, I theorize they all died together at or near the end of their 8th grade year in Indianapolis, and the Bayside years are their shared, stylized death imaginings in some sort of purgatory. Think about it, it would explain why Miss Bliss is always writing about them so lovingly and in past tense. The first season takes place in real life and Miss Bliss' real-life memories of her students and colleague. Then some off-screen tragedy strikes. It would make sense that the 3 friends and their principal, who they were pretty friendly with as well, would all be sitting close to each other at any official school event, pep rally, interscholastic sports, so if a bomb or a shooter or a bus crash were to happen, they all would go down together. Season 2 introduces 3, almost too good to be real, friends. The angelic, morally solid Kelly, the always north, social compass Jesse, and the masculine paragon Slater. The new group is seamlessly bonded and act like lifelong friends. My explanation? Jesse, Kelly, and Slater are spirit guides. Angels or spirits sent to teach and guide Zatch, Screech, Lisa, and Belding morally, and Bayside is a unique purgatory set up to give the foursome a chance to prove their inner character before facing eternal judgment. It's why the situations the cast always find themselves in tend to have moral edges. It's why they are allowed to make mistakes and are quickly forgiven. Godzilla vs. Kong Ghidorah caused the war between the Kongs and Godzillas. After listening to the Godzilla vs. Kong audiobook, they go to great length to explain that the ancient enemy was a lizard that swallowed a star. That could be interpreted as Godzilla, but considering that they also had ancient human followers, it could be conceived that ancient humans of the Kong tribe mistook a Ghidorah attack for a Godzilla attack and that spiraled into an all-out war, making it so that it became a war on two fronts and everyone lost. Especially considering that Ghidorah was frozen mere kilometers from the hollow Earth entry in Antarctica. This is the key to The Shining. The iconic labyrinth in The Shining is the central idea of the story, as interpreted by Stanley Kubrick. The carpet pattern, the scale model in the hotel lobby, the all-work pages and the typewriter and the scenes of Danny riding his big wheel around the hotel all point to the maze of insanity overtaking Jack. Not too solid on the typewriter pages, but the variations of how it was typed indicate trying a new path in the maze, and the final scene shows how the maze took Jack's life, not anything caused by the ghosts. Your thoughts on this would be greatly appreciated. Homer really has sex with Mindy. The ending of The Last Temptation of Homer always confused me as a kid. We see Homer and Mindy wearing a red dress, alone in the hotel room. After confessing, Homer confesses his fear that they're going to have sex because the fortune cookie said so. Mindy tells him how she feels, and they kiss. Then cut to Homer in bed ogling a woman in a red dress, and it turns out it's Marge. She says this was a wonderful idea, and they get in bed together. I guess the idea is that Homer resisted Mindy, then later brought Marge back to the same hotel, and she's wearing a red dress. My theory is that Homer and Mindy really did go through with it, but Homer, wrestling with both strong attraction and guilt throughout the episode, either imagined Marge in her place, or subsequently chose to pretend it was Marge in the hotel, not Mindy, a memory he could live with. We don't actually see what happened between Homer and Mindy after they kiss. The episode immediately cuts to the deceptive shot of Homer staring at a woman in a red dress from the neck down as the sexy music Barry White plays. The ending is supposedly happy, with Homer being faithful, but what if it's darker than we imagined? Dark story behind The Lion King. The first scenes of The Lion King are really dark. Did you notice what the filmmakers didn't show you? The lions feast on their people. So everybody is forced to cheer and to sing, while fearing for their life the whole time. The ape who, as an intellectual, is trusted by the people, is enslaved and forced to perform the lion's fake rituals designed to consolidate their power, presenting the next king to the people. Worst of all, the lions have created an apartheid state in which the hyenas are forced to live in a ghetto. The hyenas are caricatured as inferior creatures who are unworthy to live. The young Prince Simba is not even allowed to talk to them so that his young mind will not develop sympathy for them because of the way they are forced to live. When the young prince secretly leaves his palace, he soon has to learn that he cannot compete with the hyenas in a free market due to his spoiled upbringing, which is why he develops a deep hatred for the hyenas. Scar overthrows the king and executes him for his crimes against humanity, ending the apartheid state. The dictator's son is forced to flee into exile, where he adopts a hedonic lifestyle at his residence with his spoiled and useless friends. However, he waits for the right opportunity to take back the land, because in his mind it is his birthright to own the country. This opportunity presents itself when the land is plagued by a drought so that the people are dissatisfied. Simba spreads the rumor that it's the hyena's fault that it does not train, which makes no sense at all. However, in their despair the people are inclined to believe this superstitious nonsense, as they are desperate to find someone to blame for their economic collapse, and the hyenas are an easy target due to the decades of anti-hyena propaganda during the Old Kingdom. This allows the dictator's son to take back the land, and to force the hyenas back into the ghetto, after killing the righteous leader's car. The dictator's son and his friends take over the country where they reign forever in overwhelming luxury. The end. The Powerpuff Girls are demons made from demon blood. Him is their real father and or mother. Chemical Exes demon's blood. This theory states that the Powerpuff Girls are demons and that the chemical X used to create them is demon's blood. Therefore it can't be made, it must be sourced. This is why the Powerpuff Girls are so violent and brutal during battle, because they're demons. But they're not just any demons, they're demon daughters of him. Evidence to support this comes from the idea of how the girls don't have fingers. That's because it's a deformity resulting from the demon blood they have, similar towards the claws that him has. This deformity is more of like a hooped second piece of evidence the powers that they have as a result of him now, and are just some of the many powers him has. This theory would also like to state that the fact the professor extracted him's blood, and then raised his daughters against him, is the real reason why him hates him, the professor. And that 98% of the villains that the Powerpuff Girls fight are a result of him's interference via telepathic mind manipulation, this being done in an attempt to lure them back towards him to either A, take their place as his warrior heel princesses, be murdered or devoured for their youthful demon blood, powering him to his full strength. Extra notes: this is why despite all of their encounters, him has never once killed any of the girls, despite clearly having the strength to do so with ease. Their warrior princesses of Hell, Samurai Jack. This theory also accepts the theory of Samurai Jack and Powerpuff Girls being connected to the same universe. If we look at Aqua and his abilities, he once soaked his fingers into a couple of robot units, and by the means of his blood, converted their fuel and overall appearance towards a more demonic nature. Lord Farquaad would have been in some major hot water if he'd actually married Fiona. Fairy Godmother and Fiona's parents had it all planned out for Prince Charming to rescue Fiona. Fairy Godmother especially was banking on the arrangement, as it would allow her son and by extension her to inherit the kingdom of Far, Far Away. Just imagine how earth-shatteringly furious she and Fiona's parents would have been after finding out that some stunted, egotistical, petty and impressively chinned lord had made a deal with a grumpy ogre with a heart of gold to save their daughter and Fairy Godmother's ticket to Far, Far Away. For him to marry Duloc is a small lordship that is utterly dwarfed by the kingdom of Far, Far Away. Duloc isn't very defensible either, as this answer by Matthew Zell on Quora regarding the defensibility of Duloc clearly shows Duloc, the fortified city of Lord Farquaad in Shrek, isn't all that defensible. The wall surrounding the city is actually pretty good. We don't get much screen time with the outer wall, but it is clearly tall enough and thick enough, with towers spread across its length. The first issue is the location. The city is in the middle of a flat field, and there are zero obstacles to prevent an army from reaching the walls or setting up siege equipment. Even a simple dry moat would be a big advantage here, but the location is really terrible. Then there is the castle. This structure clearly draws its inspiration from early medieval period square keeps, common in England and elsewhere as the defensive center of a fortification. The big issue is its size. The castle is huge, stretching hundreds of feet into the air. Such a monstrous structure would collapse under its own weight, but even assuming the Shrek universe has some magical building techniques, this wouldn't be a great defensive structure. There don't appear to be any arrow loops or even windows on most of the castle, meaning the battlements hundreds of feet up would be the main spot to challenge attackers from. But it's so high, effectively engaging enemies would be near impossible. Additionally, the castle is huge, and the garrison needed to protect to keep this big would need to be huge. Combining the huge size, poor structural stability and flat surrounding ground, this castle would be very vulnerable to siege engines and undermining. The massive size of the place would require a big garrison, which would make hunger a very real threat. All in all, not a very effective castle. Not to mention Fairy Godmother is a massively powerful magic user who could easily turn Duloc into a pile of rubble. So in short, Farquaad's newly found kingship wouldn't have lasted very long at all. His death at the jaws of dragon was likely a far more merciful end than what Fairy Godmother and Fiona's parents would have had in store for him. I wanna say that there's multiple Hanna-Barbera timelines. Jellystone is a show on HBO Max about Hanna-Barbera characters who all live in the same town. Harvey Birdman was an Adult Swim show about a lawyer who represents Hanna-Barbera characters. Laugh Olympics was a show about Hanna-Barbera characters playing sports. Scoop featured multiple Hanna-Barbera characters. These can't all be the same timeline because of Johnny Quest's age. In Harvey Birdman, Johnny Quest is still a child, while in Jellystone he's an adult living a seemingly happy life. But there's another show we see an older Johnny Quest in, Venture Brothers. Venture Brothers was an Adult Swim show that started off as a parody of Johnny Quest, and eventually featured characters from Johnny Quest, such as Johnny, Race Bannon, and Dr. Zen. Dr. Zen actually being called Dr. Z in Venture Burrows, while Race Bannon keeps his name in his first episode of Venture Burrows that he appears in. Later on he's referred to as Red. Johnny is called Johnny and Mr. Quest, but they don't usually say just Johnny Quest. Also there's evidence of Mystery Inc. existing in Venture Burrows. Velma and Daphne are mentioned, but earlier in the show is a group called the Groovy Gang who are parodies of Mystery Incorporated. The Groovy Gang go by different but similar names. Fred is Ted, Scooby is Groovy, Shaggy is Sunny. We also know the Groovy Gang have killed people, so maybe they changed their names to hide. Red could have been Race's nickname. Similar situation would apply to Dr. Z. Also different timelines could explain why characters may have a different personality or appearance in different shows. Example, I'm pretty sure Boo Boo from Yogi Bear might have been a communist or something in Harvey Birdman. I don't know. I have recently seen the Slender Man movie, and within that, I spotted something which made me think if Slender Man is an elation. Anyone looking on what I'm about to write could just tell me if this topic already is covered, but I'm gonna say why I think Slender Man is an illusion and some stuff to back it up. All of this is from what I have seen in the movie. Slender Man is a character which takes children into the woods to kill them or whatever. But it seems to me that the only way to summon him is to watch that glitchy video on the sketchy website. By watching the video you have summoned the so-called Slender Man. He will hunt you down until all of those who watched the video has died. When starting the video, though, it flashes a lot of pictures, a lot of them being illuminati for some reason, then goes black. Is it possible that those pictures flashing really fast is a way to hypnotize the watchers to committing suicide? The only times when someone die of Slender Man is the people which have seen the video, and since they have seen the same video they might share the nightmare or illusion, when others are around these people having these illusions as they only see them struggling and suffering. Why is that? Because it's not there. The last person to die gets sucked into a tree, then ends up in a hospital like a crazy person. The others which seems to get dragged into the woods might just have the illusion of them getting dragged, but might actually be running in there themselves in order to commit suicide. If this is the case, the website or video's creator is a psychology with enough experience to manipulate the human mind. The only thing which can bust this theory is the videos and pictures of Slender Man. I have no explanation of them. If you can't understand what I have written, it's okay, since it's only a theory. And the mask. The eponymous mask of Jim Carrey's film is literally Loki's face, and the mask happens in the universe of Disney's Gargoyles. In Gargoyles, the Fae, Fee folk, or children of Oberon are magical beings, sometimes seen as elves and sometimes as lowercase g gods. Myths, legends, and fictional entertainment have been passed down of their ancient exploits and shenanigans. One of these Fae is Odin, whose plucked out eye became a physical object that looked like a pearlescent gemstone. For millennia it passed from hand to hand, branding power and insight. At the end of the Eye story arc, it was once again a Fee flesh eye set into Odin's face, providing him with binocular vision. In Jim Carrey's The Mask, Dr. Arthur Neumann suggested that the mask might be connected to Loki, a being of the nighttime and of trickery. There are various stories of how old the mask might be, and who might have made it in various media and continuities. Norse mythology provides us with a clue. According to Prose Untitled Chapter 35, Loki once made a bet with the dwarf Brock, and wagered his head. He lost, and in due time the dwarfs came to collect. Loki had no problem with giving up his head, but insisted they had absolutely no right to take any part of his neck. Everyone concerned discussed the matter. Certain parts were obviously head, and certain parts were obviously neck, but neither side could agree exactly where one ended and the other began. So Loki kept his head indefinitely, although his lips were stitched shut as punishment for getting out of the bet with tricky wordplay. Wikipedia. This leaves room for the real story recorded in the prose edit to have ended slightly differently, putting both Disney's Gargoyles and Jim Carrey's The Mask into the same universe. Then the dwarf Brock requested Thor to seize Loki, and he did so. Now the dwarf wanted to cut the head off Loki, but Loki said that the head was his, but not the neck. Then the dwarf took the spear gunner and sliced Loki's face from his head, leaving his neck untouched. The face of Loki was pickled, kept as payment, and displayed as trophy by the dwarf, until it was lost some time later. Rumors of nighttime mischief were heard through the ages on Midgard. Time passed, many things of magic and myth were forgotten or considered merely old stories. Then, in 1994, the year Wyvern Castle ascended higher than the clouds in New York City, and that very night in Edge City, the mask of Loki was rediscovered by one Stanley Ipkiss, bank teller and cartoon aficionado. For is the true hero of the movie, albeit a tragic one. Aside from the brilliant musical known as Twisted, Jafar is actually one of the most misunderstood characters in fiction, and he certainly deserves a movie centered around his backstory. This man has been loyal to the Sultan his entire life. Yet, he manipulated him. But his master was a reckless man-child and a bona fide dumbass, so who on earth could blame the guy for doing so? A Krabs would probably be worse without his guidance. And how does the Sultan repay him? By taking the word of a literal thief and prince over his. The only reason why Jafar descended into madness was because no one saw things from his point of view, even though he genuinely cared for the safety of his own kingdom, and because a criminal took everything from him. So what, if he tried to kill Aladdin on multiple occasions? It was for the greater good. False impersonation is an actual crime that goes against the law, folks. If this were to happen in real life, things would have gone much differently. So I fail to understand how Aladdin is really the good guy here. Rick and Morty. There is a Simpsons version of Rick in the Simpsons universe. Spoilers for the Rick and Morty Season 5 finale. So in the finale of Season 5, we learn that Rick created the Central Finite Curve, a group of universes that only consists of ones where Rick is the smartest man in the universe. The green portals created by Rick's portal gun only lead to universes within that central finite curve. This means every time we've seen Rick travel via a green portal, it's to a universe where Rick not only exists, but is the smartest man in the universe. And what's one instance where we see someone do that? The Simpsons crossover couch gag, but that's not the only place. There's also that well-known Easter egg of Grunkle Stan's mug and utensils coming out of a green portal. That means there is also a Rick in the Gravity Falls universe, and that he's the smartest person in that universe too. I guess that settles the debate of who's smarter, Rick or Ford. Monsters Home for Imaginary Friends. Blue is the villain protagonist. I know some people will be all like, well, he's just childish and arrogant, but think about all the shitty things he's done throughout the series, and even though Mac's mother was too cynical and neglectful on some occasions, she had the right to throw his imaginary friend out. Season 1 Blue was alright, but later on, he became a complete and utter nuisance with almost no redeemable qualities whatsoever. If you've watched the entire show, you'll understand where I'm coming from. He nearly turned Foster's into a cookie corporation once, just so he could satisfy his own ego. He also threw his best friend the most embarrassing birthday party ever, and nearly turned all the house's residents against him. He expects loyalty from Mac, but doesn't seem to show much himself. Almost all of the villains in the show, except for Bendy and maybe Terrence, had a reason to despise him. Even Duchess, hell, he has done more damage than the aforementioned villains before, and that is definitely saying something. Blue pretended to be up for adoption once, and when that Hollywood agent took him in, he started complaining about being abused. I wouldn't blame him, but he literally landed the guy in jail at the end of the episode, even though he was an asshole, and it was satisfying to see him get arrested. Them and the Fairly Odd Parents are in the same universe but in different times. To make this theory work, let's look at the characteristic similarities. Zim is an alien, an antagonist who plans to take over Earth, which is kind of what the anti-fairies wants to do in Fairly Odd Parents. Dib can be compared to Georgian, as he always tries to get someone to believe in something about one character, for the main characters Zim and Timmy. Zim has a robot servant named Cheer, while Timmy has his fairies. Cosmo and Wanda, both Cheer and the fairies, help the main character out of situations that the main character got themselves into. The reason they are in the same universe is all the characters from both shows can connect to a character of each show, and the reason they are in a different time is Fairly Odd Parents happens way before Invader Zim, which is why in Invader Zim they're all futuristic looking, and possibly the characters of Fairly Odd Parents were turned into the characters in Invader Zim. Man, Senseiwoo and Naruto, and possibly My Hero Academia, Death Note and City Hunter all exist in the same universe. So, to make it simple, Tsuryu from One Punch Man may be a descendant of Dragon Shiryu from Senseiwoo. Sonic and Flashy Flash both hail from Hidden Leaf Village. Nier and Zombie Man might be related, and since Death Note and City Hunter are rather street level, they may not get much attention, thus being largely ignored. Raya might be an unregistered hero. My Hero Academia might be slightly in the future, where all the heroes start getting powers. Pilgrim vs. the World. I know this sounds crazy, but hear me out. Gideon was controlling Ramona from the very beginning. Just watch the movie again and I love it, and I know this sounds crazy, but think about it. Evidence 1. Why does Ramona end up exactly where all her evil exes are? She ends up when she was trying to get away from her past, and all places drawn to the same place all her evil exes are, and at the exact time they're there too. She never participates in any of the fights. She just stands by and watches. The sole exception is the Roxy fight, and we all know that was done so we could still root for Scott and not see him beat up a girl. 3. How do all her exes even know where she at and their exact location at their exact time? 4. Why does she end up exactly where the League of Evil Exes bases of all places? And finally 5. We get shown she's being controlled at the very end. We have no idea how long she's been controlled and how she even got the chip on her. We can assume she's had it since the beginning. Which I, of course, did. Caught Pilgrim discussion question: how many of the evil exes would actually go after Scott, if not for the whole League of Evil Exes thing? It seems to me that beyond he's the guy that's now dating Ramona, not a lot of them have any reason to care about Scott. Some, like Matthew and Roxy, even seem to have more of a beef with Ramona than Scott. Are present in Dragon Ball. We never quite find out why or how. Beerus says he killed them, so we know the extinction happened in the past, but there they are. They were brought back in Jurassic Park. In Jurassic World they are released into the wild and eventually find a niche in the ecosystems. In Jurassic World, we see there's also experimentation with human cloning. This gets taken to new and unethical levels, and this is how the animal people exist. Some people are enhanced in more subtle ways, which is why it's possible to become bulletproof just by training in martial arts. Charles Lee Ray, now Chucky, goes to murder John Drive Death Bishop. It's often mocked when John goes to the phone saying you must be stopped. This is because it's usually assumed he's about to call the police, and God knows what he would even tell them if he did. But what if he wasn't calling law enforcement? He was a witch doctor who taught Ray everything he knows. It could be assumed that John was part of some sort of secret voodoo cabal, and maybe he was calling his friends for backup. Fairly Odd Parents: why all the characters in the series became less intelligent and sane with each season, and how it is all Timmy's fault. Right, If you watch Fairly Odd Parents from the beginning, it becomes obvious every character in the show has a significant decline in sanity and intelligence from their introduction to the end of the show. How did this come to pass? It all stems from Timmy's secret wish, in which he wished that everyone in the world would stop aging and no one would notice. This went on for 50 years. This wish caused a fundamental shift in memory and cognition to make them lose the ability to discern the normal passage. Despite blatant evidence at first, it didn't affect people too much, but over time, to enforce the outcome of the wish, kept dumbing them down and making less and less stable to make them ignore the passage of time. Timmy also made additional wishes to enforce the status quo he had created. Of course, it was undone and the timeline was reset, giving Timmy a second chance, but I theorize that he quickly made the same wish again, too afraid to live in a world with consequences. The Steven Universe, Black Hat helped Spinel become a villain. In Steven Universe, the movie, one of the biggest questions was how Spinel got an injector and rejuvenator, and how she knew where Steven was. As soon as I heard this, my mind turned to Black Hat from Villainous. For those who don't know, Black Hat is a villain character who provides inventions and support for other villain characters from the Cartoon Network multiverse, traveling to the shows via lightning bolt. Black Hat could have easily bolted to the garden Spinel was in, nudge her in the right direction, give her the injector and rejuvenator, and show her where Steven was. Further evidence in Villainous: The Dreadful Dawn, Black Hat's ship is shown to latch onto the head of a statue the same way the injector latches onto the Earth in Steven Universe.